Designed to be lived in, to be loved over many lifetimes, to bring quality to every day, so you can live the best life of your own design. Work Essentials optimizing comfort and function. As you make your way to the top and craft your best work yet. Iconic home pieces inspiring you from the comforts of home, allowing you to make life a remarkable legacy. Designed well so you can live life in full. CWC brings them to you.
Recently, Fortune named the most admired companies in the world, as well as the 100 best companies to work for. About the same time, Fast Company recognized the most innovative. Only 6 made it onto all 3 lists. Here they are, ranked by size. And how does a furniture company in West Michigan find itself in that group? Chances are its culture welcomes innovative thinking and fresh ideas. Solving problems in new, inventive ways is what makes them unique. Here's how Herman Miller does things so differently.
In the more than 75 years we've been dedicated to design, plenty of things have changed. Our greatest achievements are rooted in those that haven't. We design products that solve real problems, which make them as relevant today as they'll be tomorrow. We put as much energy into research as we do into testing, and as much into testing as we put into design. This has helped us pioneer products that have left some people scratching their heads asking, "What's that?" While we're already asking ourselves, "What's next?" And the whole time, we're thinking less and less about our impact on the design world and more about our impact on your world. We work in teams, and we learn as much from failure as we do from success. Our designers work with us, not for us, giving them the freedom to tell us when we're wrong, which is, more often than not, the first step towards something very right. We do all of this while making difficult choices about our product designs because we realize the hard thing to do and the right thing to do are often one and the same. We create pieces about which books have been written, and others about which people have simply said, wow. We do things with purpose, with integrity, and with design in mind. And we do them for a better world around you. At Herman Miller, the products we made decades ago are still sought after today. And the products we make today will endure for decades to come.
In 1995, Herman Miller opened The Greenhouse, our environmentally friendly manufacturing and office facility in Holland, Michigan. But we weren't the only ones to move in. Large colonies of angry paper wasps decided to make the exterior of our building their new home as well. We could have reached for the pesticides. Instead, we invited in yet another group, bees. 600,000 of them, housed in 12 beehives on the greenhouse grounds. Before long, the bees persuaded the wasps to move elsewhere. Our new friends cross-pollinated the surrounding fields, giving us spectacular wildflowers and honey, lots of it. So we began bottling the honey as gifts for our guests. And while not many companies have managed to capture their corporate philosophy in a 4-ounce bottle, we believe the story behind our honey speaks volumes.
We run an incredibly tight ship. It wasn't always that way. Back in 95, 96, we were having an incredibly difficult time maintaining our production schedules. We weren't as flexible as we needed to be. We worked through a number of initiatives to try to figure out how to get to the other side of the problems we were experiencing. One of the things that we came upon was a system called the Toyota Production System. What the Toyota Production System has done for us has been a phenomenal transformation with respect to operations. It really means the reduction of movement. You can reduce inventory, you can reduce space, while increasing our throughput, improving our quality scores, and our safety scores. We've worked with our dealers to be able to train them in the same kinds of techniques, and it's worked. They run that last mile better than anyone else. This program helps our customers in several respects. We don't build from inventory. We don't restrict any of the requirements coming in. We modify our work plans to fit you. We get many phone calls from our customers or dealers saying, I need something a little bit more than I asked for. Oh, geez, I'd rather have the blue than the green. Our process allows us as much flexibility as you can imagine to be able to flip things around in the plant to be able to get you what you need when you want it. When somebody relies on us to be able to ship something, that's our promise. When we talk about our on-time, complete shipment, that's our promise to the customer. And we simply don't miss.
So how did we find ourselves in such a select group? We hope we've told at least part of the story of what makes Herman Miller such a distinctive company. One that has, and has always had, a simple and singular philosophy to help design and build a better world around you. Whether that you is a customer, an employee, a partner, a community member, or a shareholder. And whether that better world is an office, home, school, hospital, an entire building, or the world at large. When you work with Herman Miller, you get a lot more than furniture. Together, we'll create a better world around you.
Locally. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host, Ms. Apples Aberin.
Thank you and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Heading Hybrid, Developing the Future of Work and Place Playbook. This session is brought to you by Colliers in partnership with Herman Miller, CWC Interiors, and Converge ICT Solutions. The way we work is changing in terms of place, space, and pace. The COVID-19 pandemic we've been facing since 2020 has given birth and accelerated trends that were already reshaping the workplace, presenting opportunities for businesses across different sectors and markets to evolve and optimize the way they work. As vaccination initiatives hopefully take us closer to a post-COVID-19 world, many business leaders are wondering how the workplace will look like in a post-pandemic world and what changes we need to implement to successfully adapt to a significantly altered environment. In this webinar, we will explore how the rise of the hybrid work model has changed our perspective of the workplace, prompting businesses to rethink the office of the future. Now, to formally start this webinar, may I call on Colliers Director for Office Services, Tenant Representation, Dom Frederick Andaya, to deliver his opening remarks. Dom?
Thank you, Apples. Good morning and welcome to the 5th Lifespaces event and our 4th partnership with Herman Miller and CWC Interiors. Thank you also to Converge ICT Solutions for doing this event with us. What we want to achieve in creating these events is to have a meaningful conversation with all of you about how companies can take care of their employees through their workplaces. Thus, we coined the term Lifespaces in 2018 when we did the first event, which was about designing wellness in the workplace. This was inspired by the trademark tagline of Herman Miller, Leaving Office. With this event, we are somehow telling you that we hear your concerns. All of us are struggling to figure out what the future of work and place will be because of what this pandemic did to us. The buzzword right now is the hybrid work model. But what is it exactly? How does it work? Does it work for all? And to what extent? How will the company culture and engagement be affected by this? These are some of the questions that will be answered later. As Colliers, we are in the business of advising occupiers and landlords about the leasing of office spaces, which apparently will be affected, unfortunately, negatively by this. But as true blue real estate advisors, we would rather talk about it. Because in our mind, the sooner that we figure out the way forward in terms of our people and the workplace, the sooner that we can get out of this pandemic. After all, it will take a community approach to overcome the challenges successfully. In as much as we, together with our speaker, host, and panelists, want to share our insights to you about the hybrid work model, we would be looking forward to speaking to all of you soon and figure out a way forward together. With that, let's begin the meaningful conversations. Thank you and have a good morning again.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Dom. It is indeed a meaningful conversation, or will be a meaningful conversation, because this topic is most relevant today. And of course, we are all responsible for ensuring the well-being of the people we work with. I think everyone wants to get back to business now, right? And move on to the more interactive segment of our webinar. So let me first call back in Oliver Baxter to join us in the program. Oliver, if you can turn on your screen while we introduce our fellow panelists. So there. So our first panelist is an architect and project manager with over 35 years of experience in managing business units and working with multinationals, owner-occupiers, financial institutions, property developers, and London estates. His technical and client, consultant, and contractor-facing skills have enabled him to deliver complex workspace developments across the East and Southeast Asia regions, including Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, Cambodia, and Thailand. He is an active cyclist, golfer, and skier, and a motorsports enthusiast. And he's also a father to 2 rugby mad boys. Please welcome Regional Director of M Moser Associates, Mr. Stephen Lyon. Hi, Stephen.
Morning, Apples. Thank you very much for that generous introduction, and good morning to all the participants out there.
We're excited to hear from you today, Stephen. So our second panelist, based in Manila, our next panelist leads M Moser's Philippines operations. He has over 10 years of experience in the field of design and architecture and has been involved in a range of residential, commercial, and corporate projects around the Philippines and China. Prior to joining M Moser in 2007, he has had various experiences in different aspects of the industry, ranging from design conceptualization and development, design presentations, space planning, interior design and fit-outs, furniture design, construction detailing, project management, cost management, and client relations. Wow, that's a lot. Let's all welcome Director of M Moser Associates, Mr. Donn Tan. Hi, Donn. So accomplished, Donn.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and very excited to be here to share our experience.
I'm sure we will learn a lot from you today, Donn. And last but not the least, our next panelist brings with her more than 30 years of rich HR leadership experience. In her previous roles, she had successfully led business-driven and value-driven HR and organizational transformations. She is credited with creating strong internal and external branding and a clear identity for the organization she's worked for, and holds excellent records for maintaining industrial and labor relations at the highest levels in the industry. She's also known for formulating some of the most unique best practices for the BPO and KPO industries. She obtained her bachelor's degree in mass communications, major in journalism and psychology from the University of the Philippines, and her master's degree in industrial relations from the School of Labor and industrial relations from the same university. Beyond work, she is cheerfully into cooking, gardening, writing, music, and the arts. Please welcome President and CEO of the Center for Research, Education, Solutions, and Training, or CREST, Mrs. Vida Candida-Arciaga. Hi, Vida. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm happy and honored to be here not only to share my insights, but also to learn a lot from everyone. Thank you, Apples.
Thank you. We'll get straight to business, gentlemen and lady. So the first question we have here is actually, what impact have you seen from the enhanced community quarantine on work from home arrangements? So what's the impact that we've noticed? I'm sure you've seen it with your fellow workers and employees. Maybe we can start with Vida on this. Would you like to share with us, Vida?
Yeah, I would rather say, Apples, that the impacts I've seen and have learned from clients and also from companies that I observed, both at the individual and organizational levels. The impact, I'd rather say it's not on the work from home arrangement per se, but on the individuals of organizations and teams. So I classify these impacts as psychological, economic, social, physical, mental, and of course, even physical impacts have a lot to do with the psychological, social, and social well-being of employees. So if we are able to address those, then we continue to drive their performance. If we continue to motivate them, that even from this crisis that is brought about by the pandemic, we're still able to drive their performance and their motivation. So I have observed that people have become very anxious and fearful, and I would classify that as psychological safety. If they feel that they are not safe, they are very anxious, they're frustrated, and if they're pampered, they get bored. And companies that can afford to lower their productivity measures and goals tend to pamper these employees. And that is only true and possible if organizations can afford that. But organizations that are also tightened up by their budgets and their finances are quick into deciding to streamline, retrench, lay off, and remove people from jobs. And that provides that greatest fear for employees due to this kind of, quarantines. And also, I'd like to say that we are supposed to delineate or differentiate isolation from quarantine. Quarantine is a public health measure so that people who are not even exposed to the danger of the virus can be protected. But isolation is separating the people from those who are sick or identified to be sick from those who are not. So what's difficult with quarantine is that the people who are not even sick and are willing to go out because they have to perform their livelihood duty are deprived of the means to earn their income for the families. And so the risk becomes greater. So some would even say that they are even afraid of the risk to lose their jobs than the risk of having the virus. So the perspectives differ. And I'm glad that I heard earlier that the physical work arrangement is very important, because for me, it has become an equalizer throughout all the decades. Why do I call this an equalizer? All people from all walks of life, whether they travel remotely or are near the offices, they come from different kinds of locations. The office becomes not only an embodiment of their sense of belonging to the organization, but also an equalizer for everyone. So no matter where we come from, when we reach the office, we are all equal. And that has been eradicated. That's the greatest impact for me. So there are people who have been working from home even before the pandemic. And now that it is a forced measure to go and work from home, some people are not even comfortable with that. So it is very important for us to hear our voice of the people or the voice of our employees so that we adopt the work from home model to those who can really do it there. And as we say that the hybrid model is possible, let's listen to those who cannot be productive at home because their needs are different and we can ask them to return to work if already possible.
Okay, that's clear though that the impact to the individual is not very positive, in fact, quite negative. But then we have the responsibility to see them through and help them with the arrangements that will suit them most, which is also quite aligned with what Oliver was saying earlier. What about you, Don? Can you share with us some of your observations?
Well,
Vida, sorry.
yeah,
Vida,
go
you're
ahead.
having some trouble with your virtual background. If you wouldn't mind just turning your virtual background off, because it's you're basically like a ghost on the screen at the moment.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt everybody.
That's
Okay. So yeah, I wanted to add on our experience in Manila as a design company. So for us, basically, whenever we hit ECQ, which is basically the strictest quarantine from the government, we have like very limited options for an actual hybrid workplace, because that means, hello?
okay. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, okay. So we're having some issues with the actual choice of like going to the office, given that there are definitely some health or safety reasons that restrict you. But again, as what Vida mentioned, we work from home, but we're not isolated. As long as there's communication, I think that's extremely important. So yeah, there's still needs to be some sort of like a sense of community, even if we are working from home mostly. Yeah, but I think the biggest impact that we have as of like right now during the ECQ is really like the limitations that we will have to go to work. So only we only allow our teams to go to work when it's extremely essential to do so. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Don. That actually leads us to our next question. So, because of all these changes in the workplace, how are people management policies and strategies changing as well? And also, what are some of the things that HR needs to prioritize in order to thrive in the age of continuous change? It seems that the changes are quick, and sometimes we go from ECQ, then back to normal mode, and everyone goes to the office, then we have to work from home again. So what are we doing to manage our people? What policies and strategies are we putting in place?
Maybe I can continue that, Apples, if you don't mind. Yeah, I think really the key word here is flexibility, and the need to be able to listen to each of our employees to understand what their needs are, because a lot of our employees will have very unique situations. So it's a case-to-case basis. There are some that will probably require a bit more stretch or flexibility for the employer to ensure that they will be working at full capacity. So it's really that. So it's not just like having flexibility within your office itself, but really like how you run the organization.
Don or Vida, can you give us specific examples of how you've institutionalized this? For example, you're saying flexibility is important, but really, how do we manifest it? Do you have regular meetups, for example, or forums, or with your employees, maybe a weekly forum? Can you share some examples that maybe others can also apply in their own companies?
Okay, maybe I can start with that. With the pandemic, so we have some of our colleagues who are actually based, whose families are based overseas. So we have to consider your mental health when you go to work, and that you are not completely isolated. One of my employees was basically isolated for over a year, and we have to take that into consideration and allow him or her to go visit their family in the States and spend longer hours remotely. to be able to do so. So that's one example. So there's no one cookie cutter thing to make it work, but really it's about listening to whatever the needs are to get them to work effectively.
Okay, thank you, Donn. What about you, Vida? Any tangible examples?
Yeah, let me add to that. So I would say that apart from giving specific examples, I would talk about how companies approach this kind of crisis. First of all, the pandemic crisis is just one of the many crises that any organization, location, country can encounter. It just so happened that, this is so vast and so deeply impacting. But the way most of my clients have done this is check how people are managing the change and help them also build that resiliency that is critical for managing that change. So they have actually reviewed and revisited their competency matrix and checked whether leaders or subordinates have that skill, that critical life skill to deal with change and manage the change and also build resiliency, not only at the team level, but at the individual level. Because what we're talking about here are lives, and not only our work lives, but our family lives. Remember, when we instituted the work from home, we have intruded the personal lives of each and every one. So we can no longer say now which is work and which is personal, right? The line has been very thin. And when we say lives, it talks about our lives itself, not just work life or personal life. It doesn't end with the shift or the work hours. So as a consultant, this is what I suggested as a framework for an approach or intervention. We reviewed practices, processes, policies, and the strategies of the organizations. And it is very important that the people strategy is almost the same or equivalent to the business strategy. If the business strategy is not the same or aligned with the people strategy, then we will break. Because who runs our business? It's really our people. Whether we are technology driven, we are dependent on automation and softwares, technological innovations, digitalization, and all that, it's still our people who are running and leading our businesses. So that apples and everyone required us to look into the competency matrix once again, and we reviewed the employee life cycle. We looked at the end-to-end people experience or the employee experience, because at every phase of the employee life cycle, people will have different needs. So for example, in hiring, how do we attract the people who we want to join our organizations? And nowadays, it's not just about choosing the people, but the people also choosing their employers, right? It's not just about what do you have so that I'll hire you. It's also about the candidate asking himself, what do you have so that I'll choose you, especially if I have other options, right? So from the hiring process to onboarding, to paying salaries, giving benefits, how do we manage performance? How do we lead our people? Are our team leaders equipped with skills to, check on every subordinate from time to time? The control methods that we have, for example, are we output driven? If we are output driven but do not look into the processes, then we may attain our goals, and yet our team leaders may be missing on making kumusta, right? How are you today? Or what's happening to you? You're not sick, but do you have symptoms? Why is your productivity tapering? So it's different when there was no pandemic. And now that there's pandemic, when the productivity is affected, we should be very keen to look at that right away. And when I say end-to-end, it also talks about performance management. Before, we have adopted performance management as discipline management per se, but not really looking at how do we bump the good ones to very good? How do we help the very good performers to excellent? And what do we do with the poor ones? Do we get rid of them right away or look at what they are lacking? Do they need more support? Do we identify those who need more supervision? Because from home nowadays, the supervision is less. They have nobody beside them to tell them what they should do better. And of course, at the end of it, we don't want to just fire people if they don't meet the goals. We want to look at how they can be helped, how they can be supported. And of course, we have all those compliance from DOLE and all the government agencies, compliance to have a occupational safety and health program, mental health program, and all that. So the work has become larger and expanded. So for instance, for HR alone, we have become jack of all trades, but we were not trained to do so, right? So do we need more people or do we need more training and education? So we are into this continuous process of experimentation, exploration, and learning.
Yes, thank you. So, and having said that, actually, Vida, at this point, we don't really know if a hybrid setup will work for a company or not, right? So, but you guys have already tried this, you've done studies around this. So we have this question on key elements and identifiers that can help employers decide if they should or should not switch to this hybrid workplace setup to begin with. I mean, what are the major corporations or industries what are they benefiting from this setup, or what are the employees going to benefit from it? Maybe we can start with you, Oliver. Like, how will they determine then that this is something they should do?
Well, firstly, Apples, we do know that a hybrid strategy is incredibly effective. Hybrid might be unfamiliar to some, and they've just got accustomed to it because of 2020. But this isn't new. We've been doing this for a really long time, just under a different guise, under different terminology, teleworking, remote working. Hybrid is just the terminology that we're using today to describe the experience. But if we look at some of the data pre-2020, so I mentioned the research from Gallup, and by the way, sorry, I've had a few emails from people already coming in and some messages about some of the references that I used, and also the link to the ergonomic assessment. That will all be sent to everybody after the session as well in the follow-up. Thank you for attending email.
Yeah.
So from the Gallup data, pre-2020, so in 2017, they asked a question around how often do you work in the office or outside of the office? So you've got full 5 days a week at one end, and then never in the office at the other end. So you're working completely remote, or it's that kind of office first strategy. And then you've got, well, I work in the office for 1 day a week, 2, 3, 4. It's a good spectrum. And what they noticed is those people that were in the office 100% of the time, or were never in the office, so that kind of office first or remote first strategy, they had the lowest levels of engagement than the people in the middle. So the ones that had more flexibility, because ultimately you're being very restrictive at either end there. They're the lowest level of engagement. Engagement is how enthusiastic and motivated you are to do your job. It's associated with productivity, performance, share price as well, and how the finances of an organization are also associated with the employee engagement and performance that are in there. Gallup identified that the sweet spot is around 3 to 4 days of the week not working in the office in terms of the biggest spike in engagement. So if we care actually about the employees and supporting their work and getting the most from them, because that's the reason why we have offices, right, is to augment people's work, then actually giving them more freedom, not less, is the best way to do that. And it's great for the bottom line, it's great for the share price, it's great for the employees, it's good for humanity. It means that we don't have to be in these densely packed cities, riding the tube to work or anything like that. It's and that's data from even before the pandemic. So we were aware for a very long time that the distributed working and hybrid strategies were very effective with supporting people.
Thank you, Oliver. Stephen, would you like to add anything to this?
Sure. Yeah, I think the technology was actually the turning point. So I think many of us have been working a hybrid existence for at least 10 years. I mean, I think smartphones, iPads, laptops was kind of the turning point when you could actually pretty well work from anywhere. Unfortunately, in the early days, that wasn't particularly supported by broadband and internet, but now, well, certainly I'm very lucky. I live in Singapore. We have excellent coverage, but I know I used to work in Manila a lot. The coverage is pretty good, particularly if you go into hotels or community centers or co-working spaces. So the enabling technologies allows us to start working remotely many years ago. And I mean, I think I probably would say that I've only ever worked in the office 2 days a week for about the last 12 years. I'm sure Donn would probably back me up on that too. So the pandemic's kind of widened the need to operate in a hybrid way, but I think many of us have done it for many, many years. So it's not new.
So I guess the next question then is, what are some of the biggest risks that companies face if they don't adapt to this changing work culture post-pandemic? Would anyone care to answer this?
I think Oliver started talking about that with the three the three sectors that he had. I think he had banking, technology, and companies in between. And I think the big risk is that if you don't adopt a hybrid model, that the other sectors that do will actually start to poach and retain some of your top talent. So I think if you want the best people to work for you, you've got to give them the best set of conditions. What that looks like in every different organization, I don't know, because there is no one size fits all. I'm both a practitioner and I run an office. In fact, I've just leased a new office. I don't intend to reduce the amount of space I take because I'll give much more space to community, and I need that community because I don't want to risk losing my talent. So I think we adapt or we die to a certain extent.
That's true. What about you, Oliver? Anything to say on that? Or that practically sums it up: we adapt or we die.
Yeah, I think Stephen's right. We're going to know real quick because employees will walk. We'll see their movements. We've seen it in the past. So just an example from the tech sector, those that didn't evolve. So Yahoo, before Marissa Mayer had that leaked email that she sent out with the bums on seats memo, they were an employer of choice. And then when they decided to go to a more restrictive model of mandating that everybody come in, and not necessarily everybody was living in close proximity to the Yahoo facilities, they lost that employer of choice status, and they lost all their talent. And it was comical. We saw articles in newspapers saying, are you working at Yahoo? Want to go back to being able to work remotely or in an agile fashion? Come and work for us at Microsoft. Their competitors were literally making fun of them in the tabloids, and now where are Yahoo? So it's a good example from the past that we can learn of, and let's hope other organizations don't repeat it. I mean, the banking sector, I think we're going to see that in the States. That's just the States, by the way. The banking sector in Europe is taking a much more measured approach about the return to the physical workplace and potentially adopting some hybrid strategies going forward. So we might be able to compare and contrast the sectors in different parts of the world depending on their strategies as well. Now, I know where the banking sector are doing it. It's because they've got data that demonstrates that if you are physically with a client, you are more likely to close the deal than if you are digitally with a client. But that is not the only indicator of performance. There are many other indicators of performance that you need to broadly look at, and engagement, as I said before, is the big one. Unfortunately, what we discovered during 2020 is that engagement went down. So in 2017, we had the lowest level of engagement that we've seen in the last 50 years. Only 15% of employees were engaged with work in 2017. That rose to 22% in 2019. And then during 2020, engagement dipped by 2%. So currently, that's the only data we have is from 2020, we're at 20% engagement. That means 80% of your employees are not engaged with the jobs that they're doing. And there's loads of data out there talking about how 55% of employees are thinking about moving jobs after 2020. And that's based on a variety of circumstances, but also how they were treated by their employer during 2020 as well. So we are no longer in an employer market as we were in 2020, letting people go, having that luxury to be able to do so. It's now an employee market again, as it was before 2020. And as you quite rightly pointed out, Apples, we have the choice, and we will walk with our feet, and we can now digitally work for companies around the world. So in Dubai, we've actually just launched a digital visa, so you can stay here and then work for someone in Silicon Valley. Wow. I don't know what that's going to do to your circadian rhythm and your ability to sleep at night, but you can do that and actually work tax-free, remotely. So we're actually becoming a destination of choice as well as an employer of choice in this part of the world. So really interesting to see that.
It's interesting. You mentioned the banks in the States and how they're obviously trying to get their people back to sit on the office seats. I'm working with a British bank regionally, and they've just rewritten all their staff's contracts to allow for a hybrid model. So I think they're contracted now to come into the office so many days a week, and it depends on your scale and where you are in the hierarchy. But they've pledged to reduce their office holding, their leased space, by 50%. In the banking sector, you've got complete extremes at both ends. My gut feeling is that somewhere in the middle is probably the right solution. I think probably reducing real estate by 50% is probably too aggressive. Trying to get everybody back to the office is a high risk and too aggressive. So somewhere in the middle, potentially as well.
Okay, so it seems like it's inevitable. We're all going to move towards some hybrid kind of working. But, Oliver, what struck me was you mentioned that employee engagement went down tremendously, like 20% you mentioned. So I wanted to ask, how can organizations sustain and redefine their company culture and employee engagement in this hybrid work model that we're now facing? Would anyone like to address this? What are some things we can do to get our employees engaged?
I heard something really interesting the other day from Mace. They were talking about digital FMs, or digital community managers. So for those organizations that are still, in lockdown, or they've got a high proportion of their employees working remotely, how can they be supported? So a digital FM would not only support them by providing ergonomic tools to do their job, but also making sure that they're connected to a greater community. Because some people, and like the Gen Zs, may have started their job during 2020 and have never physically met, anyone in their organization. But I also think that we need to get away from this this myth, and I very much believe that it is a myth, that the culture of an organization is so fragile that it can only be done when we physically come together. I don't think that's true. I think we just need to look at new and innovative ways to develop that, in the digital world. I mean, if you look again at the younger generations, they've got friends all over the world, from like computer games, that they've never physically met. Now, of course, as a psychologist, I understand that physical interactions are the best. There will always be better than the digital interactions, but digital interactions can really sustain that community culture as well if they're done right. So the idea of a digital community manager or a digital FM, I think, is a really interesting concept that may seem to be experimenting with around the world. So maybe look into something like that.
Okay, thank you for that, Oliver. Would anyone like to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to add, Apples. Yeah. Yes. So I think whether we want to go hybrid or not, it's not a choice, actually. It's not an either or, but the equation or the composition of the blend of workplace and office-based and work from home differs from one company to another, or one industry or sector to another. So it depends greatly on the nature of the business. That also impacts the roles and nature of work of people, and the competencies of people required to do their jobs, attain the goals, maximize and optimize their full potentials, not only to be successful, but also to be happy. And let's consider the employee's personal circumstances. And though it's very hard to do a process to determine what works for one and what works for the other. If you have a very big organization, we all go back to the overall strategy and the ways to measure organizational effectiveness, because organizations are made of individual people, and these individuals are the ones who work and contribute to the attainment of those goals, to the sustenance of those core values, as we say, which are very important aspects of what we call culture. And depending on how we also design our engagement practices, let's go deeper into the real engagement. For me, engagement is not about the gimmicks or the activities that we conduct to keep people, interested, perky, and alive, but what will make them keep interested in looking forward to the next day, even if it's somehow boring to be working from home, or it's somehow taxing to go to the office once in a while. But for me, engagement is for an employee to go and say, I look forward to tomorrow. I look forward to the next month and be part of this company for a long time. And I think that we should be very careful about designing our employee value proposition. So if the employee value proposition provides some flexibility in terms of the employee's preferences and options, like consider the rotation, the flexibility as a benefit also that they can choose from, then it becomes a more enticing proposition for the right employees to be retained and hired by the company.
Okay, thank you for that, Vida. I heard you mention the word effectiveness earlier. So I'm curious to know if there has been any change in the way you measure effectiveness in this new hybrid model. Has there been a shift?
Yeah, I've seen some shifts. Yeah, I only have my company is very small after a full-time employment for more than 30 years, as you introduced me. I've been a consultant, and now I'm exposed to more companies than before. So I've seen some companies shifting from output or outcome driven to internal process driven. Okay, so why do I say this? While before they focus on, whatever the means, we just want the goals to be fulfilled or attained, right? Now I've seen clients, of course, those who can afford to do so, that they have been more focused on looking into the processes, like team leaders. How are they coaching people? How are they supporting? How are they checking on well-being? And companies have been willing to compromise somehow on the productivity goals, as long as they see that the employees are behaving correctly according to the shared values of the organization. But I've seen also some companies who have been very rigid still. Despite the crisis, they still have those goals which are almost unattainable. And of course, that's very risky. They have terminated a lot of people despite the crisis. And well, it's a choice they have. They also disrupt the kind of branding that they project, but it's their choice and decision. But somehow in the long-term future, I would say that what we say as leaders, if people don't see that being practiced by us, like integrity, honesty, trust, respect, then we eventually lose our people. So I've seen those shifts, Apple.
Okay, thank you, Vida. There are some questions now on the actual workplace, so I wanted to move the discussion to that for now before we lose time. So I wanted to address Stephen, and how do you structure the workplace for a hybrid team? What are the current fit-out considerations in designing an ideal hybrid workplace?
Okay, Donn, maybe I'll start off. Thank you, Apples. I think the first thing in terms of designing or considering the hybrid workplace or enticing people back to the office is going to be safety and security. People are going to feel vulnerable, and it depends where you are. If you're going back to the office in India, it's going to be a much higher risk than going back to the office in Singapore. I suspect Manila at the moment is perceived as reasonably high risk as well. So environmental considerations are what we're going to have to look at, which, you know, in addition to the walls, the pieces of furniture, the color of the carpet, the flexibility, the collaboration spaces, you know, an enhanced pantry, maybe cooking facilities. Just, you know, we're going to have to get the attractiveness right, but we really are going to have to think about the wellness of individuals, and they will stay away if they perceive that there's a greater risk to their personal safety, or they're going to get ill by going to the office. So I think it's a holistic solution. I don't think we can just talk about the layout, creating individual offices, booths, etc. We've got to look at biophilia. We've got to look at how plants might influence the oxygen in the environment. We've got to look at air monitoring. Maybe we've got things like you know, breakfast is provided, which is an enticement to get people back into the office. So I look at it as a completely holistic solution, and it's again, no one size fits all. It'll be different for every organization.
There is a question here, though, on the fear of contracting the virus. So, Donn, being that you work in a local environment, what are some of the things you've done to allay this fear? Because apparently this is a major concern for everyone today.
Correct. Well, basically, it's all about like what Stephen just mentioned about security and the feeling of safety, right? And the feeling of safety needs to be within a somehow controlled environment. So, like what Stephen mentioned earlier, we're talking about not just the floor plate in itself, but really looking at the further into like the engineering of the space. Are we having enough fresh air that goes into this space? How do we monitor the fresh air intake that we have? How do we monitor the light that we have? Are we having enough plants? Are we being separated properly? So these are things that say if I go to an office where I know when I check my phone, I know that okay, the indoor air quality is X amount, which is good. And my space right now where my alternate space where I usually work is not, then there is a possibility for you to choose that instead. And then another thing is flexibility. So when we talk about flexibility, we talk about not just community spaces, but also like, okay, I can go to work and I can have probably a phone pod or a work pod where I can work privately. So considering all of those scenarios, I think will be extremely important.
Are you currently applying any of those right now, Donn? And how do you disseminate the information to your employees?
Well, for us actually as a company, we treat our offices as some sort of like living lab. So it's always experimental. I think some of my colleagues are surprised. We just moved to the office before we hit the pandemic, and then I'm already changing as we speak. So yes, we apply all of those. So even say when you come into the office, everything is touch free. Nobody needs to touch the door to enter the space. Everything is we have facial recognitions.
Wow.
And we continuously improve on that. And yeah, whatever technologies that come in, so we have like these MERV filters, infrared sensors that help us. The technology is there.
Yeah, I've just to add to that, Donn. When the pandemic hit, we obviously looked at all our offices around the region, and because Asia was hit before the States and Europe, we came up with a whole series of ideas how to improve the security and safety in our own offices. So you've talked about touchless fittings, but we put in ultraviolet into our air conditioning system, which kills microbes and bugs. We put in air purifiers. We put in automatic doors as well with facial recognition, and also linked to a software package which recorded your temperature, put it into an Excel spreadsheet, which was for audit purposes, allowed us to demonstrate to the government how much occupancy the office was actually providing. And as we go forward, we're developing those systems more and more. And interesting, many of our clients have asked us to do that for them as part of their fit outs over the last 12 months as well.
That's actually quite amazing, Stephen, which brings me to this question on digitalization. How important is it in a hybrid work model? And then there's this thing about data security as well, right? While we work from home and then the office, how do we secure our data?
Maybe I'll just start off. Of course, the digital environments is huge. I mean, we wouldn't be talking today without Zoom, would we? Which, you know, I mean, last February, I probably had never even heard of Zoom, and probably many of the participants hadn't. But we've got used to using Zoom, Teams. We use a couple of pieces of software that we can use to show walkthroughs to our clients as we construct our fit outs. So if you're sat in an office in New York, you've appointed M Moser in Singapore to do your fit out for your regional office, we can actually online show the progress of the job. So the digitalization, the pieces of software that have been constantly updated are absolutely crucial. Security you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know how many, probably Oliver will probably have the data, but I mean, there's at least 30,000 companies in the last 6 months have had ransomware attacks. And many of those attacks are coming through remote working because it obviously opens minute doorways to hackers. So security, double, you know, putting in 2 numbers before you can log into a system, etc. What's that called? 2FA, isn't it? I think.
Two-factor authentication.
That's the word I was looking for. And I think, you know, again, you've got the companies have to really focus on it, or they can, you know, be extremely vulnerable. So, yeah, we've got to develop these softwares. I mean, I think a lot of people will have used things like digital whiteboards, and they're just not the same as getting up there with a felt tip pen and some post-it notes. But they'll evolve and they'll get better and better. And, you know, we can have digital workshops now. We wouldn't have even thought about that 18 months ago. It wouldn't have been on the agenda. So we've moved forward a long way.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we only have time for 2 more questions. So I'll address this one to Herman Miller and maybe Agnes Sauler from CWC. So somebody asked, we have considerable investments on furniture and fixtures. In most cases, these are tied up with income tax holidays from PEZA, which limits our flexibility to dispose of these pieces. Are furniture companies now also considering retrofitting and or maybe trading existing furniture to adapt to the hybrid workplace? Is this a consideration at all?
Hi, Apples.
Okay, so
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, Agnes Sauler is the VP for Marketing and Sales for CWC Interiors, and I've actually ambushed her to answer that question.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I won't turn on my video because the signal isn't so great from my end. But to answer that question, I think yes, service providers, certainly all of us are adjusting also to the requirements of clients. In fact, what we've done in very early on is really address the needs not just of companies, but ultimately the end user. In terms, for instance, on work from home, making sure that they are up to date on the products and the tools that they need. Should it be that there should be adjustments on the workplace, ultimately, we need to be ready for that as well. And it's already happening. In fact, it happened as early as middle of last year. Companies adjust quickly. I believe the good leaders and the good managers also are adjusting to the communication requirements as well, as we can see from the job and the roles changing within the workspace. Those are adjusting too.
Thank you for that, Agnes. Oliver, would you like to also answer the question?
So there's, I think I'm going to abbreviate. So there's surplus furniture because of remote, what to do with it. I think we saw a lot of people, myself included, able to borrow furniture from the office to support the remote experience. So if you haven't already, just give it to them, or give them, a stipend to invest. So you see companies like Facebook and Amazon give like $750 to $1,000. As at Herman Miller, we also got like $750 to invest in ergonomic solutions ourselves, but with guidance as well, because not everybody knows what they need to invest in to support their best work. Yeah, everybody kind of understands, I've got a back problem, my back hurts, especially if you've been working in an office for more than 5 years, you've probably got a back problem. So a good chair is great, but like if you've got a good chair and you're still working from a laptop like this, you're going to be hunched over, and then that's going to negate the benefits of the chair. So making sure that your monitor is up and in the right position as well is also really key. So we need to educate and inform as well as provide people with furniture. There was also a question in the chat box that I saw earlier on about whether it's the employer's responsibility or the employees. And what we've seen during 2020 is that the average employee has invested over 16 hours and $300 of their own money on average in figuring out the homework setup. But of course, different regions around the world have different experiences as well. So the UK, Europe, for many of those countries there, it's actually been law for a really long time that it's the employer's responsibility to provide those ergonomic solutions at home. And then you've got companies like Germany, and because of the amount of unions that they have in Germany, they've gone one step further. So not only do they have to pay for the Wi-Fi, and also pay for the electricity and gas that's used on those working from home days, they even have to pay for the real estate that the desk sits on in the office. So the employee leases the space to the employer from home that they're working on. That's how much the Germans have responsibility, at least those that are working in those unions that stipulate that. So it's definitely lies in the hands of the employer from my point of view. Furniture, people look at it and think it's really expensive. It pales in comparison to the negative consequences that can occur by not supporting employees' work. So if you look at the occupier matrix from Cushman & Wakefield in the States, they say that $10,000 is roughly how much we spend per employee per year to house them in an office. And of course, if you're in Singapore, like Stephen is, or if you're in Hong Kong or New York or London, that can double up to 20,000. And from the World Green Building Council, they've identified that we spend 90% of a company's expenditure every year on people. About 10% is on real estate. Of that real estate, like 1% is the furniture expenditure. So we're asking the wrong question, it doesn't matter about the furniture. And this is coming from someone who sells furniture. It's the people that are the most important thing. And some furniture might be surplus to requirement, but we need to switch that conversation to focusing on how can we augment the employee's performance wherever they choose to work. And furniture is one of the ways that we can do that. Management strategies is another great way. I'm really pleased and proud. And one of the great repercussions of 2020 is that HR are now at the table. And that's why Vida's here today. Would she have been part of this, 2 years ago, 24 months? Maybe not. I've been honored to speak at 2 HR conferences every year for the last 6 years in Dubai, because they've been asking, how does place relate to people's performance? And now we understood that because of 2020, HR had to come to the table because it's about safe and secure returning to work. So now they're here, stay. And I'm going to say something quite provocative, which I'm a bit worried about saying because I'm about to speak in a couple of hours at a facilities management conference live in Dubai. But I think that corporate real estate could report into HR, or at least a dotted line into HR, because it is about people, right? It's not about offices. It's about people and supporting the work that they do wherever they choose to do it. I hope I don't get attacked later on today.
Oliver. Thus living spaces, right? I mean, that was really good how you summed it up. Now we don't have time for any more questions, but I'd like to ask the rest of our panelists to give their last words, maybe words of advice for everyone watching us today. And thank you for that again, Oliver. I mean, people first always, and that's how it works best. So maybe last words from Stephen, Donn, and Vida. Who wants to go first?
I can jump in. I don't particularly have any last words, but I think my advice would just be to experience, to take on what you want to take on. So, you know, if you think you need to work 5 days a week at home and that you're effective, then why not? You know, just keep the conversation going. And I don't, you know, we'll have this talk in 12 months time and it'll all have changed again. So you know, we just got to accept that change is endemic, and we've got to adapt. And as was just said, it's all about the people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say it. Okay, so yeah, I think major drastic changes have to happen if we want to survive. Yeah, this is true for small to large companies. So beyond the enterprise level, I would say that our laws have to adapt also to the change. We cannot keep on changing alone. The government also has to support that change process. So one thing that I want to push is for a positive change on employer-employee relationships laws that govern this relationship. Yeah, there should be nothing wrong about flexible employer-employee relationships. Part-timers, freelancers are now welcome because of the hybrid models that we have, but not at the expense of the rights of people and the rights of businesses, because we have to work together.
Thank you, Vida. And Donn.
Yes. Yeah. Like Stephen, I didn't have a final word, but essentially, what I want to say is that yeah, I think in these trying times, I think it's really important for us to be very flexible. It's a very stretched word because not just where you have to sit to work, but also how you listen to each one's needs. As what everybody's been pointing out, it's all about the people at the very end, and you know, productivity won't happen if we're dealing with many other issues as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, that wraps up our panel discussion. We want to say thank you to our panelists, Oliver Baxter of Herman Miller. Thank you, Oliver. Stephen Lyon and Donn Tan of M Moser Associates, and Vida Candida-Arciaga of Crest Inc. Thank you so much. You know, this conversation has been really interesting, exciting, and very, very relevant and insightful. So we appreciate you taking time today to be with us here. And for, you know, we have so many other questions actually that we weren't able to answer today, but the team will make sure that we answer them and we send them back to you so that we can glean more insights from today's event. We hope that you were all able to glean relevant insights from our speakers and panelists, and that these will prove useful for your respective organizations as we gradually move to a post-pandemic world, or hopefully move to a post-pandemic world soon. As we wrap up this webinar, I think all of us now have a good understanding of how our workplaces are changing and what tools and knowledge we need to successfully navigate these changes. So we've come to the end of our webinar. So just want to remind everyone as well that we have some special offers on our iconic task chairs at CWC Interiors. So just do check the website or call the store if you need any help at all for our trade-up program and fourth ones on us. Now, we come to the part of the program where everyone's excited because we're going to announce the winner of a gorgeous Herman Miller sail chair in all black. This is courtesy of CWC Interiors. Here's a bit of trivia. The designer of this chair is actually Yves Behar, and he took inspiration from suspension bridges, specifically the Golden Gate Bridge. when he designed this task chair that stylishly combines form and function. Now, to announce the winner and to give his closing remarks, I'd like to call on Kevin Hara, Senior Manager for Office Services Tenant Representation of Colliers, Philippines. Hi, Kevin.
Thanks, Apples. Just a little bit before we go to the raffle, and just a quick word for everybody. So on behalf of Colliers Philippines, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our keynote speaker, Oliver Baxter, our expert panelists, Stephen, Donn, and Vida, and of course to you, our superb host, Apples, for joining us in today's webinar, Heading Hybrid. This topic is very timely in our current situation, now as decision makers and workers grapple with the current pandemic. Hybrid work is here to stay, and this can be an effective strategy for your organization to thrive during these times and in the future. From promoting meaningful work experiences to giving companies a competitive advantage, we believe hybrid work can mean a various suite of benefits for many businesses. To our valued clients, industry partners, and guests, thank you again for taking the time to join us this morning on this important topic. We hope that you find the insights in this event valuable and actionable, and we look forward to having you in our next event. Colliers Philippines aims to invest in relationships by delivering meaningful client engagement experiences even under the current circumstance, and be experts by sharing insights that will help lead our industry into the future. We aim to accelerate your success, and we remain ready to support you with your real estate needs. Please keep safe, and we wish you all a successful rest of the year. Thank you, and let me call back Apples to the screen for the raffle.
Thanks for that, Kevin. So now, exciting time for you to draw the winner of our sale chair. Go ahead, Kevin. Digitalization is key after all, so we have a digital raffle. Okay, and the winner is
Tony Angeline Dorotheo. Congratulations. Are you still
Congratulations. Are you here, Tony? Is Tony here? Tony Angeline Dorotheo needs to be here to win the chair. So we need proof of life. Are you here, Tony? Maybe you can type.
Yeah. Maybe you can show yourself.
Make your presence felt in the chat box.
Tony is not here. I think we need to spin it again.
Okay, then we have another go.
Great. Okay. Spin and win.
Yeah, for those who can't see, this is like a Wheel of Fortune type of circle.
I like the Wheel of Fortune reference.
We had so many attendees today. That's why it's very small.
And the winner is
Melissa Berhel de Dios.
Congratulations.
She's not here.
She's not here. Okay, one more time.
Oh, let's keep on spinning.
More chances for others to win.
Congratulations, Kathleen Allison Wu. Are you here?
Is Kathleen here?
Yun.
Oh, there's a phone-in question from George Fitzgerald. How much to ring the raffle? Okay. So Kathleen is here, right?
Yes, she's here.
Yay. So congratulations.
Congratulations,
Kathleen. And thank you, Kevin, for helping us with the raffle and for your closing remarks. So Kathleen, our team will reach out to you after this webinar on how you can receive your prize. So at this point, we want to thank everyone everyone for attending today's webinar, Heading Hybrid, Developing the Future of Work and Place Playbook. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to the organizing team. And once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback so we can better serve you next time. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Colliers Philippines, CWC Interiors, Herman Miller, Converge ICT Solutions, and our presenters today, I'm your host, Apples Aberin. Thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.